Operator Syndrome, episode 61. 61, that's right. Um, Last episode, talking about my experience going to college after serving in the Army and serving in the National Guard. Interesting time. Today, I'm going to talk about generally broadly my experience with the VA system. I'm in college. I'm doing the National Guard thing. Um, the National Guard thing was looking back today. I'm still mixed on whether that was a good thing to do or not. Um, on one hand, there were some benefits I got out of it, right? Um, like literal benefits, like healthcare coverage, some stuff like that that I could tap into. A couple bucks, for showing up for the weekend and
Yeah.
and pledging some of my summer. Um, but also, it was tough in that, um, I was trying to move forward to do the next thing, but once a month, drag right back into the army stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I talked about how, unfortunately, the experience, in the National Guard is often a lot of the problems that you experience on the active duty side without any of the 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 positive things of active duty service, right? So it's like when you're serving active duty, you get a lot of fulfillment out of doing your job, right? Um, Working hard towards, individual goals, doing that school, completing that course. That's where you sort of that's what keeps you going throughout your time. But in the National Guard, it was just show up, wait around, do trainings, weird taskers, um, uh, things like that.
Right.
So, I found it to be sort of negative
Hmm.
in many ways because I just kept getting dragged. I'm trying to move forward and I keep getting dragged back. Um, all of it sort of reaching its crescendo the next time I became eligible for to have to go to annual training, and I just wanted to, you know, knuckle down and knock out a summer course to keep going. And here's the army, invading my life, telling me what to
Yeah.
do, getting in the way again.
Yeah.
And that's a contract I signed, and that's fine, but I can still be mopey about it. So
Okay.
I had earned that right. So, but I did it, and is it ever as bad as you think it is? No, it's not that bad. I mean, I probably won't go out of my way to go to Hattiesburg, Mississippi again for any reason. No offense to anyone who may
Yeah.
or may ever hear this. Um, Interesting town, not for me. So so, but all that plays into, the mindset, what we're dealing with, operator syndrome, right? Part of
Right.
that being the loss of identity, when you're getting out,
Yeah.
transitioning, and and all this is going through my head, um, and I thought I was okay, you know. A lot of us getting out think we're okay. At the time, at the time I got out, everyone talked a lot about physical ailments, and and that's good because we were talking about how to get treated for that. And from a psychological perspective, at the time it was still all PTSD focused. That's really all anyone talked about. Um, just the idea that you had to have you must have experienced some kind of combat trauma, and then you're having Vietnam flashbacks, right?
Right. Right.
But it's way more complicated than that. You don't have to have seen combat at all to get out of the military and experience a real tough time transitioning out. Why is that? I think, and I've heard, now that I've gone through the process, a lot of, we join the military, most of us in our formative years, and it is an identity that we put
Hmm.
on, right? So it's not just a job. They don't allow it to be like that, right? We go to a boot camp or a basic training where we're conditioned and drilled, like all these words, they do
Right.
something to us.
Hmm.
And then when we go to get out, we're not just leaving a job, we're leaving an identity.
Hmm.
Um, and so I I didn't know it at the time, but I was definitely having issues related to, to just getting out. Yeah, some combat stuff was in there definitely. But looking back now, a lot of it was just me being a young guy going to school, you know, just like you talked about, you got out and one day you're high speed Navy SEAL and the next day you're working construction.
Hmm.
For me, it was one day I was an Army Ranger, Ranger NCO,
Hmm.
right? And then the next day I'm just some college college punk,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Right. So, real whiplash.
Yeah.
Um, so uh, I I was being encouraged to talk to someone pretty much as soon as I got out, up till 2 years after, we'll say 2-ish years after. Um, and it just fell on deaf ears. I didn't recognize that I was having problems. I didn't feel good. If I think back to that time, I wasn't feeling like great.
Hmm.
I was hopeful. I think that's just my personality. I was hopeful for the future. I felt like I was probably in the right place in school, trying to figure out what to do. But in terms of like other than that, I think I felt pretty like meh, just kind
Yeah.
of not great. Um, so and I would be prone to, so there's that, just generally like a general malaise.
Hmm.
I was still working out mostly, kind of, uh, unless, for some folks, maybe they can maintain the level of fitness they did before. But remember, I was a fat kid when I joined up, so like when when I got out, it was a slippery slope to go right back towards that. I fought against it. I tried to maintain.
And
Um,
there's always preparation H.
Preparation H and shrink wrap, or
Congrats.
saran wrap.
Grand.
Uh, but yeah, yeah, there is. So, but eventually, oh, what I was gonna say is, you know, so I had that day to day. I was I was prone to bouts of like anger. Um, so I could, if I got worked up enough, it could be pretty bad.
Mm,
Um, Not like throwing people around, getting
yeah.
physical, but just like I could really let loose,
Mm.
Um,
What were the primary what were the regular targets? Family?
well, I was married at the time.
Um,
I was married, newly-ish married.
mhm.
So, she was a target of that, or she was in the line of fire,
Yeah.
right? Um, it was, I can't think about nothing. There were, everyone goes through tough things in life, and um, you can approach those in different ways. I think we talked about this once before, but
Yeah.
for me, it was anger. Like that's like the
Yeah.
easy button, right? It was like to flip a switch and to just be enraged about it.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I don't think that was a thing in my personality necessarily. I don't remember being a kid like being able to flip a switch and just be like rowdy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I don't remember it that way. So I do assign that personality trait as something that came out of the certain, what specifically triggered that, and was that something, I don't remember that. There may be one or two instances while I was serving where I can remember getting really upset to that
Hmm.
level, but it was definitely once I was out, I was
Hmm.
feeling it more. It felt like it was happening more. Um, and so, and I was getting like the, poked and prodded, like, "Hey, you should go talk to someone. You should go talk to someone. You should go see somebody." And I was like, "I'm fine. Like,
Yeah.
I'm great. I'm alive. I'm in school."
Yeah.
Like, what do you? I was like, I was honestly offended.
Mm.
I was like, "I'm fine. I'm doing great. Look at me.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
can you tell me I have a problem?" I have nothing to complain about. Um, and then I don't remember a specific instance that caused me to say,
Yeah.
fine, I'll go talk to someone. Yeah, I think it wasn't one particular thing. I think finally I just got worn down. And I think that's the magic of, nagging, you know, they
Yeah.
do it because it works. Eventually
Yeah.
you do get worn down. And so like I got nagged to the point where I was like, I'll go. And then I never want to hear about this again. Right. I'll call your bluff. Fine. I'll go talk to someone. And I'm going to go get the clean bill of health.
Yeah.
I'm going to get the clean bill of health. And I never want to hear about this again.
Right.
So, um, I in the town that we lived in, there was a VA medical facility, one focused on mental health type things. And I went and talked, and I just told them it was a service available to me, nothing specific. I went, I said, hey, like I- it's being recommended to me that I should come and talk to someone. This is a service available to me. I'd like to just talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Um, and so I got assigned a guy, and um, I don't remember it being that difficult to do it, to sign up. I
Yeah.
don't feel like there was much of a wait. I feel like I got in there pretty quickly, from what I remember. But it wasn't a great experience
Uh-huh.
talking to this guy.
Hmm.
Um, so I go in there. He's got to know what my deal is, right? It's the VA, so he's got access to my
Yeah.
records. He can see what I've done. Um, and my experience was he had a script that he had a script that he was going to follow to fix me, is what it felt like.
Right.
It didn't feel like he was really listening to me as like an individual, or in he wasn't listening. He wasn't interested.
Right.
Is maybe the word. Like he had a process. He had a process, a beginning and an end and an outcome, and he was just
Right.
gonna plot me into his process, and I should come out the other side, and I should be
Yeah.
fixed, or I should just be moved on. He
Yeah.
was a nice guy. It wasn't about that. He wasn't an ass. He didn't but and I'll give like the first example is, um I'm pretty sure it was it was like the first session. So he's
Yeah.
like, just give me a little bit of background. I give him a little bit of background, from my perspective. And then, at the time I was, because everyone else was focused on combat related sort of mental health stress, right?
Hmm.
I was like, okay, if there is something wrong, it'd have to be related to that. So I'll talk about that. So I was talking about, you know, losing folks, feeling guilt about
Yeah.
not being around, um, for when that stuff happened, leaving guys while there was still a war going on, um, and his answer was he wanted to do this exercise. He starts off. He's like, so first off, I don't care how you grew up. I don't care about religion. I want you to ignore all that for a second. I was like, okay. And he's like, if you were to switch places with a guy that died, would you want them to sit around and mope, and or would you want them to move on and all that kind of and be happy? I was like, well, yeah, I would, of course, I wouldn't want them to to be sad and to just, you know, ruminate over, what happened to me. I'd want them to move on. He was like, great. And I was like, okay. And that was
Oh,
it. That was his punchline. And
yeah.
I was just like, at that moment, I was like, dude, this guy or this process, this is a fucking dud. What a waste of my time. And
Oh,
that
yeah.
was it. He was like, well, there you go. He was like, so that's enough for today. And why don't you go think about that? And when you come back, and of course, so I leave, and I'm like, what a fucking waste, you know? Like for and I'm getting
That
enraged.
now anger's kicking in again.
So I'm getting pissed off that
Yeah.
this fucking, so, but I was just processing. I'm like, step one. um, most people, at least we used to, right? It's like
Yeah.
religion is a huge part of your set of values and how you grow up and how you see the world. Step one, ignore like
Yeah.
70% of your of how your mind works. Just
Yeah.
go ahead and do that. Trust me on this, and just feel better. Okay, we'll
Yeah.
talk to you next time. Yeah, that's how I felt. I was like, what a fucking joke. I can't
Yeah.
believe this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I could see where what he was saying.
Right.
That thought process, what he was talking about is something I do believe, and I do think of it that way, but um, that wasn't the right message at that time.
Yeah. Sure.
It wasn't the right message at that time, and it wasn't done. Human beings are complicated,
Right.
and you're not just going to cut to the chase.
No.
And that's 100% what he was doing.
Right.
Again, was that him? Was that the VA's process? Was that just how mental health professionals dealt with us back in those
Yeah.
days with the information they had? I'm not, although I did get a little angry just now reliving it, but I don't hold it against anybody. But
Yeah.
that was not it. That was not going to help anybody.
Well, I if I can interject a little bit
Yeah.
here, that I've had that same experience with the VA, and I'll just say this, and of course, no specifics at all ever. Um, there are some VA workers who are not licensed clinical psychologists or psychiatrists. I don't want to disparage any degree category or anything, but I think they may come from more of a social work background,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't. So psychology and the complexities of the cobwebs of our minds is not on the forefront. I dealt with a lady who, again, nice lady, no problem. Like she seemed to be a caring, decent human being, but she was doing that scripted thing, and I was like, this is totally not helpful. I know not that you're trying to be unhelpful. It's just not
Mm-hmm.
helping. And I could tell the level of depth she had on, because then later I went to a PhD clinical psychologist, and it was a world of difference. I mean, this was somebody who really had the tools to go where I needed to go. Let's put it that way. So, just I guess for listeners, just to say, they're try to get to a trained, licensed clinical psychologist or psychiatrist if the medical side is needed, as far as medication or something like that. But yeah, I hear you, man.
It, yeah. I I I walked away, and of course you lost me, right? It
Yeah.
you've lost credibility with me. So when I come back, what do you think I'm gonna say? She says, so what do you think? How you feeling? Fine, good. Yeah, that was helpful, right?
Hmm.
I think we had two or three more sessions. Talk through. We did talk through some stuff. It- there's another component to it, which is the VA rating piece.
Yeah.
So this our discussions, it was it was tied to potentially, a VA rating compensation type deal, whatever that process is.
Right.
Um, and so there was this thing where I felt like no one he never said anything. I never got the feeling, but it was just in my head that it was hard to separate the fact that, you know, I'm looking for help, I guess. And that's what my focus is, but there is a monetary compensation tied to whatever diagnoses, right? They give you. And
Right.
so the whole time it was just hard to feel like, and maybe it was just in my head, but like, do these people, are they do they think I'm like, do they think I'm making things bigger than they actually are because I'm just trying to get cut a check, right?
Oh yeah.
It's like I could really give two shits about that,
Yeah.
but but I'm honestly looking for help. But just the fact that they're just tied together like that, right?
Right.
They know that what they say in their interaction with you, there's a monetary thing related to it. Um, I don't know. It wasn't comfortable. It just wasn't a comfortable process.
Yeah.
Um, my 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 wife was sure that I had PTSD, because that's what anyone ever talked about. That had to be it,
Yeah.
right? You go to
Yeah.
war, you leave, you're not the same. PTSD, that's got to be it. This guy determined that I did not have PTSD, um,
Yeah.
which would made me happy because I was like,
Yeah.
what have I been telling you? But he listed off some other things. Uh, he listed off some other conditions, which basically now everyone has, right?
Right.
Anxiety, depression.
Right.
Who isn't diagnosed with anxiety, depression,
Yeah.
um, nowadays? But I was like, okay, sure, I guess I could see that. Um, am I just depressed because am I depressed just because losing the identity? Am I anxious because I'm in college and I'm reinventing myself? Right, all these kind of things. Who knows? But
Yeah.
that's ultimately what they diagnosed me with. Um, but I actually don't think there was any kind of like monetary compensation tied to that. All I had ever got was the hearing thing,
Yeah.
um, the ringing in the ears,
Yeah.
which everybody has.
Yeah.
Um, so that's it. But that was my experience,
Mm.
from like the mental health side. It was
Yeah.
just wah wah, right? It was just
Yeah. Yeah.
it was a waste. It was um, and so it didn't fix anything. There's the moral of the story is, and if anything, it made things worse because, well, I talked to a guy, right?
Yeah.
He gave me the magic formula to stop having a pity party. So I guess I'm good to go, right? Like I did my 5 sessions, got my 5 VA sessions. I'm checked off.
Right.
I get the free sub. Um, and then otherwise, like from you know so so that wasn't great because I hadn't solved anything, I hadn't worked through anything. I was now somewhat resentful of the VA, and I got
Yeah.
a chip on my shoulder,
Yeah.
and you can't help but walk away feeling like, well, okay, well, they threw a doctor at me and they can't fix me, they
Yeah.
can't fix it, whatever this thing is I'm supposed to have. So that was the vibe I was working with. Um, from physical things, just the VA in general. I wanted to say, um, it is it's like a unique experience, right? Rolling into a VA medical center.
Yeah.
You roll in. There's always like the massive waiting room with like a bunch
Yeah.
of old vets
Yeah.
decked out in every hat, pin,
Every
sweater
hat on earth.
combination. Just a parking lot full of Silverados,
Yeah.
and F-150s with
Yeah.
Marines and Air Force. It's funny. It's funny. Um, and then you go in there and they're just it's almost like it's almost like walking into like a VFW or something, right? It's like,
Yeah. It
but you
kind of
get
is.
doled out prescriptions.
Yeah.
But I never was seen by like a general,
Yeah.
doctor.
Yeah.
I for some reason I just remember getting a lot of eye appointments,
What appointments?
like eye appointments. Like
Hi.
that
Oh,
was
okay.
ophthalmology,
Mhm.
optometry, whatever
Optometry
it is. Um,
or
maybe that's
ophthalmology.
because while I was in, I got PRK. I got like the eye surgery while I was in. So
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
maybe that's why, but I was never seen for anything else. So I saw
Yeah.
the head, I saw the shrink, and I saw and then I would see like an eye doctor like every 6 months or something like that. And then that was it because my understanding of the system at that time, maybe it's still true, maybe it's different, but I only had, because I wasn't a retiree, I
Right.
only had like a 3-year window where I could go
Yeah.
in, 3-ish year window where I could go in for basically anything.
Right.
Um, anything related to what you get a rating for, a
Right.
disability rating,
Right.
for, I think, for the rest of your life, you're covered for that thing. So
For
if you
that.
or if you hit them up, so I got the hearing thing, right? So when I inevitably need hearing aids,
Yeah.
like I'll go over there and then they're supposed to take care of me. But after that 3-year window is up, like I'm a nobody. I'm like John
Yeah.
Q. Public. So I can't go in there for to just see a doctor because my knee hurts or this or that
Yeah.
unless I get it tied back to my service, right?
Well, okay, that's interesting. Now that's the way it was for a lot of years. And that all changed.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, I found this out just totally happenstance. So that was that was my VA experience for years and years and years. And I don't know what year, I mean, it'd be easy to Google it, but whenever the Affordable Care Act passed,
Mm,
whatever year that was, there was a line item or grandfathered in to that. I don't know what the right word is, but in that legislation, it was 100% coverage for any veteran, non retired, with 10% or more disability. I had 10% at the time for my ears. And I had just gone through a divorce and was living by myself in downtown Louisville in a little one room apartment. And I really didn't have a pot to piss in. I didn't have much money. I was teaching as an adjunct. And I called the VA to see if I could get a flu shot of all things. Now, this was 2014 ish, right around there, maybe early 2015. And I got this really helpful guy on the phone because all I wanted was a flu shot. I mean, no. And he said, well, you're eligible for health care coverage. And I was like, but I'm not retired. Like, I said, what do you mean? And he goes, no, no, what's your social? And so he types it in and he goes, yeah, you've got 10% disability for tinnitus, like we all do, ringing in our ear.
mhm,
And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, dude, you're at level 3. You've got full coverage and all your medicines paid for and everything. And I'm like, how in the world did that happen? And he goes, it was the Affordable Care Act. So, and I, like we say, we don't get into politics, but like whatever you think about the Affordable Care Act, man, a lot of veterans, I thank my lucky stars every day for that coverage.
mm,
It's full coverage, and it's some of the best coverage I've ever had. Now, the old VA system going back way many years ago was a nightmare. They have revamped the VA, and we're talking in the last 10 years, to where it is a really efficient system. I just today, I picked up my prescription in the mail for a blood pressure medicine I have to take. It comes to my door. I don't pay a dime. My physician is at what is called a primary care clinic. It's a VA primary care clinic. He's the best doctor I've ever had, and I've had lots of civilian doctors. He's fantastic. Cares about me, goes through my blood work. I mean, so it has come a long way. But check into that. I told Kevin recently when I'm last summer, I was like, man, you need to check into this. He says, really? Because he's paying money for his own health care. I mean, I don't think he's gone on Medicaid or care or anything like that. But and also, and this is the last thing I'll say about that, the VA care, it's come light years. And there's an economist who writes for the New York Times called Paul Krugman. I think he teaches at Princeton or one of those highfalutin universities. He's professor of economics, and he wrote an essay um, in a book called "Arguing for Zombies." But this was a New York Times piece that he had published in the New York Times, and it was an essay about the remarkable efficiency of the VA system, which comes as a shocker to a lot of people. But he said it's being looked at as a possible model for more of a national kind of program because of the efficiency in it. And they've cut cost. It's the way they triage all the stuff they do is pretty good. So anyhow, if you've given up on the VA in the old days, I understand why, but give it a second look, veterans. And if you have any 10%, which almost everybody does, for ringing in their ears or higher, you can get full coverage. I'll just call your regional VA hospital wherever you are. Just Google the closest one to you. Major cities all have them. And ask for an admissions counselor. I think that's the title, and they will walk you. All they need is your social, and I had coverage in like 2 weeks. I mean, I couldn't believe it. So
That's wild.
just something to think about, guys and gals.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, I was obviously right up to now
Yeah.
check up on it.
Mm.
I've had, after I graduated college and I did the guard thing. And then so I just swapped over to employer insurance.
Yeah.
And up through today, that's what I've been doing. Um, and, I get decent coverage, where I work. So,
Yeah.
but it can't hurt, right? To have additional, especially since I only recently found out, as an adult, you're always learning. It was dental
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah.
Like you pay into insurance and then, but there's a cap on like what they'll pay back in a year. You're like, well, wait a second. I thought that was the whole point. It was like, I pay into you, you manage the risk just in case something crazy, my mouth blows up and then you got to fix all it. It's like, no, no, no. You I'm just now figuring that out,
Oh yeah.
my mid 30s. So that was fun. But yeah, my personal experience with the VA, if I look at, because I did the GI Bill, right? That's VA administered. I did the different healthcare stuff. Um, Generally getting the services went pretty smoothly. I actually never really had any issues with my GI Bill experience. And that can be like a pretty tangled web of
Yeah.
you got to get paper for this and get your school to do that. And I can't think of a single time where I had an issue. I've heard of folks having issues. And I was doing a yellow ribbon program because I didn't go to a public university. I went to a private university.
Hmm.
So there was that added step there.
Yeah.
But I never really had any issues with that. I might have had better or worse experience with different um, practitioners, doctors, providers, whatever you call it, like I just
Yeah.
detailed. But overall, it was an it was an okay experience. I think prior to the VA, they were just their misses were like some big misses.
Mm.
In the
Yeah.
early 2000s when they were
Yeah.
first dealing with the the huge influx of folks trying to get services and forgetting about folks dying because they were forgot all kinds of crazy things going on, um and that's hard to recover from. So
Yeah.
um okay, yeah, I'll check that out. And like Steve said, if you all qualify or you may qualify, you might want to check that out too.
You might have full cover and you don't pay a penny. You don't pay co-pays. You don't pay
Nothing.
for your
I'm
medicine.
gonna get every type of scan available.
Oh, I've had MRIs that I'll just take, we've got a few minutes. I'll just tell you a story. If this, my back is jacked from parachute landings, like hundreds. I mean,
Hmm.
hundreds of combat equipment landings. We just jumped a lot, and part of it was I was a jump master. So I, but that is really hard on your back, crunching into the ground
No doubt.
with gear and these MC1-1 Bravo round parachutes. It's a totally different thing if you're jumping squares, but when you're creaming into the ground over and over again. So I, and my back, most days it's cool. I can function. I try to stay away from really heavy lifting and stuff like that. But I have a farm, so I'm always throwing a bag of peat moss up on something, and every now and then, about 3 times a year, it will go out, and I cannot walk. I can't get
Mm,
out of bed. It hurts so bad. And I have a deep empathy for anybody with back problems. I never did before I had them, where it'll go out and I can't walk for like a week. Well, I'll start being able to walk about 2, 3 days after it goes. But I mean, I'm crawling like with tears in my eyes. It hurts so bad. My dog's looking at
whoa.
me going, like, I'm like, this really, this is how it ends, man. My illustrious career is this. But no, so I went and I did apply for some added compensation for my back. I had no idea if I'd get it, but so because the VA they'll look at anything. So I told my primary care physician at the VA, could I have a scan, an MRI of my back, my spine, because I think I've got issues. He goes, yeah, do. He entered it in his computer. He goes, call the VA, they'll schedule it. So I mean, scan an MRI scan because several $1,000s, and So I go there, state of the art machinery. They burn it on a disc for me. I said, because I want a copy of this because I know you're sending it to my physician, but I want a copy of this. So you got the right for that. Burned it on a disc. And in the process of my VA claim, I went to a civilian orthopedic surgeon and I had to pay for that. That was out of pocket, but a couple $100. But I had the disc. I could take him the MRI and say, doctor, all I'm not trying to scam anybody here. I'm just saying, in your professional opinion, would you write an opinion about looking at my scan in my back and knowing the narrative, which I can prove from lots of paperwork that I had lots of combat jumps. Would you make an opinion about that? And he wrote something to the effect of, he looked at it and he goes, "Oh yeah, geez, see this?" And he went down on the cross sections of this MRI and he's like, "See how this is triangular and it's compressed?" And I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't have known that." He goes, "That's not supposed to be triangular shaped. It's supposed to be round and all this other stuff." I'm like, "Well, geez." And he's in his write up, long story short, getting shorter, he wrote something to the effect of, it is more likely than not that his combat equipment parachute landings contributed to this degenerative lower spine issue I was having. And that qualified me. Boom. The VA said, "Well, we're giving you compensation." So all that's to say, you kind of have to play a game. And it's not, like I say, if there's I think, it can be overdone, and I don't know about all of that. That people run stuff that's maybe bogus or whatever. But if it's a real issue, and if it really causes a veteran pain, my gosh, there are resources out there, and that's one way the system can work in your advantage and save you. Well, not only save you money, but I'm getting compensated for some of that, which helps because when my back is out, I can't do several things that would be more profitable to me and my income. But fortunately, it doesn't happen that often. It's not completely debilitating, but it's an issue. And so all that might be more than everybody wanted to hear, but
I'm a lot of folks, me included, and you, from what you've said, you have we have the attitude of like, we knew who we were signing up for, right?
yeah,
We knew that it would take a toll on us. Um, and for ourselves, sometimes it's hard to say, I deserve that.
right.
I did my job, and and it's a unique job, and
Yeah,
I did unique things in service of my country, and so it would be cool if my country would help me out with this.
yeah,
Um, and when you look at it for yourself, some folks can't get over that hurdle. But if
yeah,
you take the perspective of, well, for me, of course, right? Steve deserves to have his country take care of him for the sacrifice that his body
yeah,
made. And so, and for the men and women out there, I would say the same. So
yeah,
just, be apply that towards yourself as well, if you can, if it works
yeah,
out. You at least deserve a try. Um,
absolutely.
okay, well, that's all the time we got this time. We'll come back and we're going to talk next more about Steve's experience as a chaplain there,
Yeah.
back on active duty. Uh, okay, talk to you all next time.